This program was produced and first aired on Access Manawatu with support from New Zealand On Air.
Community Access Radio. Access Manawatu.
People have talked about the end times for a long time, right? The rapture has been right around the corner since the 1600s or whatever. And some people love to catastrophize and talk about how everything will end on Y2K or 2012 and that is, of course, a silly phenomena, and we can look at the reasons why people do that. That is fundamentally different than the conversation around existential and catastrophic risk we're talking about now that is associated with very real and very new phenomena. And it's important to not make this confusion and say, oh, that's just people catastrophizing. It is important to get that if people have a sense of like, shit, civilization as we know it could end, and other people are like, no, that'll never happen. Every previous civilization in the history of the planet ended. Like, we don't have Sumeria or Mesopotamia or Egypt or the Maya or the Aztec or the Inca civilizations anymore. We don't have the Roman Empire or the Ottoman or the Byzantine. And some of those lived for hundreds or thousands of years before they broke down, but they all broke down. But we weren't there for those. It's history. We think it doesn't apply to us, but each of them probably thought it didn't apply to them. So this is a super important data point people should actually pay attention to. All of those empires were local. Even if they were big, they were still local, and if they failed, lots of other parts of the world weren't affected at all. And lots of border areas did well as a result of it. The computer I'm talking to you on right now was made on a globalized infrastructural supply chain that involved 6 continents in terms of where the metals were mined from and where the oil came from that made the plastic, where the silica that made the glass, where the software was developed. No country could make this, right? So we have this radically globally interconnected infrastructure. We have climate change is a global issue. Species extinction, peak nitrogen, nuclear war, AI, these are all global issues. So we have a global civilization for the first time. That never happened before, not that long ago. And so if we look at all the previous civilizations collapsed, but they were local, now we have a global civilization, but we don't know how in the history of the world to not have a civilization collapse. We can start seeing that we have a real task ahead of us, that we need to figure out some things that we have not previously known how to do. Because the collapse of this civilization doesn't leave many unaffected areas, right? And might leave no unaffected areas, depending upon the scenario.
The old appeals to racial, sexual, and religious chauvinism, to rabid nationalist fervor, are beginning not to work.
This is who I am and whether I'm good or bad or achieving or not, all that's learned along the way.
Just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money.
I realized that I had the game wrong. That the game was to find out what I already was.
Yet the free market, like the real economy, is overwhelmed, just as in a cancer. There are only more absentee money sequences with no required life functions or accountability to the communities and life conditions they competitively bleed. That's what the competition is about. How fast they can get the money from the public, competitively draining them, hollowing them out. And that's what the competition means. But the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing. The enemy is undefined. The common life capital that it attacks is unknown. Both the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing who the enemy is and what the solution is.
So today I'm joined by some fantastic humans from around the planet. We've got people here from Netherlands, Spain, USA. It's incredible what you can do with this modern technology. So guys, I thought probably best to get you guys to introduce yourselves, eh? So Jenny.
Hi.
Jenny, where are you from? What organisation and where are you from?
So I'm actually out of Los Angeles right now, and I originally got together with the Venus Project a few years ago and have been a big supporter and proponent for a while now.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining Project Sanity today with us. Now, Gabor, where are you from at the moment, and what organisation are you with?
Yeah, actually, I'm from Hungary, from Budapest, but I'm living in Spain, the Canary Island, and I joined the World Summit, which we're talking about today, from here, and I'm representing the Envienta project that was born as a next-generation sharing economy model in 2015, and I am also representing this peer-to-peer open-source platform cooperative, which provides shared know-how, blueprints, products, and resources for the members.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great. And now we've got Charlotte. Charlotte, can you tell us about where you're from?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from the States, but I've been living abroad for about 35 years in Asia, and now for the past 25 in Holland. I represent a online learning group called Moving Forward RBE Learning Group, which was born from my association with people in the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement. And the two founders of World Summit, they also came to our online meetings, which we do with Zoom, by the way. and that Tony and Troy, and they invited me to come to the World Summit in Mexico. So I'm really thrilled to be part of the organization, as it really represents, as far as I'm concerned, the unifying principle that all groups all need to get together and work together towards as one.
Great, no, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, we are on Skype today in this old Huckary-Dory studio in New Zealand over here. But yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, now, and we've also got Robert. Robert, hello.
Good day, Scott. Hi all. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I'd like to say that I come from Europe, and I'm representing a similar platform like the World Summit, the United Earth. We started this 3 years ago, and sort of have the same incentive. Also working on a Synergy Hub network, so creating hubs all around the world, so all the change makers can come together and do all their good work.
Oh, that's fantastic. Absolutely. So look, I really firstly just want to thank all of you for joining us today. I think it's really awesome that we can come together, different time zones. I always say this, just to remind everyone, different time zones, different country abstractions, different organizations, in fact, and really, really awesome that we can come together to talk about and these emerging ideas that are, bringing us all together. So we have had, just for anyone that hasn't listened before, we have had the World Summit founder and the co-founders, Tony Kriegel, Troy Wiley, and James Greywolf Petruzzi on this show before. We did an episode called Unifying the Unifiers, talking about the challenges facing all of us to do pretty much, what we're going to talk about today is this, again, unifying the unifiers. World Summit, for anyone that's not really aware, is about bypassing existing systems and borders to unify ourselves, basically. Really, really awesome. So firstly, maybe we should just go around, probably in that same order if you like. Maybe just talk a little bit about, now you've just had this mini summit, which when the founders were on, was, it was coming up. And now that the mini summit's sort of been, and you guys have sort of been involved in that process, I think it's probably maybe a good point to start with, just this mini summit that was held in January in Mexico. And some of the, my view would maybe is a good grounding for this conversation would be some of the core understandings or some of the core common ground, because that's what it's about really, isn't it? Trying to find common ground in the reunification process. What are some of the core understandings, the core common ground that was arrived at, I guess you could say, at the mini summit? So Jenny, would you like to go first with that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what Troy and Tony brought up that was really important in my point of view was that the house is on fire, and the concept that it's time that we no longer talk about what we should do or what we can do, but it's time to take action because the earth is on fire with everything that's going on, with inequality, with hunger, with environmental issues. So I'm so excited and happy that Troy and Tony brought us together as a world team and learn how to speak to each other in a nonviolent communication way and work positively together as one to make a change right now. And that is one of the biggest takeaway for me, that it's no longer talking about it. It's actually coming together face to face and just giving us the humanity that we need, because at the end of the day, everyone, no matter what color, what race, we just want the same things, which is harmony, love, food, basic needs met, and just live a beautiful life with the environment that can last for infinity for our next few generations. So it's really time to let go of our egos and just talk and figure out solutions for the future. So that's one of my biggest takeaways.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. So, Gabor, what's your view on that there's this common ground?
I think the World Summit for me is about connecting different projects and approaches and giving real solutions for the mankind. So when we put together our thoughts in Mexico, I realized that we want this. We are based on the same foundations of these solutions, and if we quickly find a way to put together these groups in one event, because the World Summit is basically, I think it's an event or the series of events throughout the world. So through the World Summit and through the Mini Summit, we can find the local initiatives, not just the global initiatives, but the local initiatives, and talking about local solutions. For me, that is about.
Absolutely, that's great. I like to view it as kind of a new global logic that needs to be applied to the local level. That's kind of what I think about it. You know, it's like an emerging logic and applying that, of course, to the local level. You know, yeah. So Charlotte, how about yourself there with this common ground?
Yeah, for me, one of the strongest points about the meeting and about the World Summit in general is that it is a holistic approach. This, for me, is important because you see a lot of groups that approach change from either a scientific or materialistic or an intellectual perspective, and then you have other groups which approach it from a more environmental or spiritual or heart-oriented way. And what was so wonderful about the mini summit is that we had representatives from, let's say, the head people and the heart people. So we had people from all the different movements like Zeitgeist and Money Free Party and Venus Project, but we also had Native Americans there, Navajo healer. We had the guy who was Jim, who led the Standing Rock protest and things like that. And that has made such an incredible difference. It's the time in our history now, in our development as a species, to unite both of these, that we're not split in some kind of schizophrenic war with ourselves, but that both sides work together to create and protect the earth that we have been given.
That's fantastic. Robert, what are your thoughts on this?
I think, and maybe I will repeat a bit what Troy and Tony expressed in the last interview. So I think we all understand as movements and groups and individuals that the current socioeconomic model is not sustainable. And we all understand and recognize that now, at this point, all these hundreds of thousands of movements and groups and orgs and NGOs, etc., they're all working on projects towards a better world. And I think we all understand that nobody can do it on their own. So they're all beautiful projects with greatest intentions and incentives, But we have to pick up the tab together and unite and join forces, so to speak, to move beyond the critical mass. I want to talk about it maybe later, this critical mass thing. So, and we already reached it. So, seen from the current competitive socioeconomical consuming model, it means that we are inviting movements who are open to aligning with the World Summit incentive to leave their egos, like just mentioned, the personal projects and the personal agendas, and all attachments. So we have to leave it at the door and see how we can resolve matters together. So for me personally, the common ground we found each other on is that we understand and see all the current worldly problems we are experiencing in all different kinds of sectors of society. They are interconnected, and we already reached this critical mass. So
absolutely, I think that you're right. That concept of critical mass is an important concept to talk about. We'll talk about that a bit about that soon. Actually, different views on kind of what that means, and I know you've got a really good perspective on really what this really means. Hey, so Charlotte, let's get into, I think you call this dis-ease, don't you? Which is an interesting term, actually. We think of disease, but this, I really like this when you in preparation for this, and you sent me this thing saying about the social dis-ease that is necessitating. I think that's a key word, necessitating and supporting a social transformation. Would you mind talking about that a little bit for us? What you mean by that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I actually did a presentation last month on reaching critical mass and a historical analysis of that. And I found that in previous societies, there are basically 4 aspects which lead to the rise and fall of a particular civilization. I looked at Rome, I looked at England, the United States, and also Russia. And there were 4 elements that you can look at that will indicate how well a society is doing. And one of the first ones is the economy. Now, I think everybody is aware of the fact that the economy is in pretty bad shape all around the globe. You've got global unemployment coming from various factors, such as automation taking over work, but also just that you cannot continue to produce things without end. That when you have finite resources, you cannot produce infinitely. So there's problems with job satisfaction. People are being kept in menial employment just to keep the economy going. We have to have consumers with money to buy things, even though most of these jobs, or a great many of them, could be automated and free people up from these repetitive tasks. You've got the employment age aspect. So millennials are really having a big problem with things now. As, for instance, in the United States, more than half of the jobs are already taken by people between the ages of 45 through 64. Countries that risk the most loss of jobs through automation are pretty much the countries in which there is no trickle-down effect, let's say. So places where the government doesn't care at all about how workers are faring, such as Zimbabwe and China and things, they're all risking a high level of unemployment. Then you've got, of course, the military. Now, the big thing about the military, first of all, in the United States, it's sucking up about 36% of the total GDP. So you've got huge spending. China is the second in military spending, but it's not even a third of what the U.S. is spending. But more discouraging is what happens to people after they have served in the military. In the United States, you've got veterans who are really in a bad situation. One statistic is that every day, 22 veterans commit suicide. 39% of veterans suffer either traumatic brain injury or some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. And they also have a great level of homelessness. African American men between the age of 31 and 61 are really hit hard by becoming homeless. Then we can look at the political factors. An analysis of satisfaction with democracy has shown that the majority of people in so-called democratic lands are dissatisfied with how democracy is working. There was a strong correlation with how much growth there is in the economy and how much people trusted their governments, but the overall statistics were 52 dissatisfied to 46%. And finally, the social and cultural factors, you see that there's a huge growth in nonprofit organization and non-governmental organizations because there's a general understanding that the government is incapable of fixing our problems. And so with these four crucial areas in society, people are suffering. And one final thing about disease, I strongly believe that there is a general sort of collective unconscious which is really just suffering for all the inhumanity and all the killing and all the wars and suffering that is being undergone worldwide. And this is forcing people into increased narcissism, increased drug and alcohol abuse, increased escapism, because they don't see a solution. The World Summit is offering a solution, and that offers hope.
That's fantastic, Charlotte. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, when you put it together, it's incredible, isn't it, with the amount of dis-ease there is. And I think one point that really sticks out for me, what you just said, is this idea of all these, these non-government organizations that have had to be formed to kind of clean up in the wake of what our social model is doing, And again, that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? It doesn't matter sort of what organization you are or where you're from or sort of what, quote, solution you're looking for. Without a sort of a unification approach, I mean, that's really the challenge, isn't it? Is kind of what the World Summit is trying to do, is to try and pull the groups together to what Jacques Fresco talked about, is bridging differences, So I think, Jenny, would you mind carrying on this train of thought? I think, when it comes to the main World Summit event, we're talking about, and there's, different aspects to this too, but I know that one of the main drives is to have a big event, and it is kind of multiple events as well if we need to on a sort of a local level as well. But if we're talking about the main World Summit event, and what can we do as everyone, really, because it's not just up to you guys, right? It's not just up to you four and me. It's this is all of us, right? What can we do, or what can we expect, and how will we make this World Summit event a reality?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I'd like to continue what Charlotte was saying. I think part of what we discussed in the summit is that we no longer want to be individual groups focusing on symptoms. Rather, we want to create a whole new platform on a whole new socioeconomic structure. And with that in mind, we need everyone's heads involved and our hearts involved. And that is why we're creating this World Summit event. And our target date is sometime next summer. That's really what we're targeting, but I mean, it could be sooner, it could be later, depending how everything plays out. And we're really excited about that. And to get us there, that's why we need everyone involved. And we are creating platforms, websites. We have our worldsummit.global website, as well as our COEO website, which basically brings together all of the individual groups so that we can talk together and unify and basically invite everybody to come. And actually, thanks to Robert, he created 12 different sectors of people that we want to bring to the summit. And let me kind of tell you what they are. There are food, environment, and water, media and communication, learning and education, relations, peace building, community. And another group is spirituality, personal development, and religious. And another one is justice and governance, and ancient wisdom, as well as resource sharing, economics, and trade. And of course, there's going to be art, culture, and music. Then there's housing, infrastructure, transportation, and then there's science, technology, energy sector, and the last sector would be health, wellness, and family. So those are like the 12 sectors that we've came up so far. And we want to invite experts and people who are just interested in these groups to come together and have, could be a weekend, it could be a week-long event where what we envision is basically inviting people in those groups to come together and have conversations like what we did in the World Summit, propose issues, how do we problem solve, how do we work in a model that is nonviolent communication. So we started looking into communication model platforms such as holacracy or sociocracy, which are new ways to communicate. So we want to introduce that to all these groups to learn how to work together. And then it's not only these people, that will be just the inner circle. Then we'll invite everyone who's interested, all ages, all colors, to be part of the outer circle that will attend these group meetings. And then we're inviting the whole world because they'll be televised. And basically through these events, people can pose questions using technology that will be provided there. And then the people watching from outside can ask questions, and we'll have moderators where we can actually communicate with each other. And so as you can see, this event will really involve everyone, not only from local level and also as a global level, to come together and learn to remove all our egos and just focus on our purpose, because we really have to focus on purpose, and it's going to be a purpose-driven event. And we want to shift that to the entire world where we're no longer just focused on our personal goals or personal reasons for going to a job. Instead, focus on a purpose-driven economy or, resource-based economy. What are we doing with these things that are precious to us? That should be more important than anything else in the world, and that's what we're trying to create and cultivate a new way of thinking and a new way of approaching our future way to create this world. So we're really excited as we move toward the event to bring this to everybody.
That's fantastic. Look, thank you so much for that, Jenny. I think that's really, really awesome. I tell you, a couple of things that really stick out for me, when you talked about, and a couple of you have mentioned this actually, is about marrying the heads, the intellectual stuff, the theory and all that all these different groups might have or whatever, with the heart, and about what we really want to do, what we really feel is really, the right purpose. As you say, it's all about purpose, right? And bridging all that. Hey, so look, guys, thanks so much. What we'll do, we're just going to have a quick break now, but I think just to let everyone know kind of what we're going to be sort of covering when we come back, what we'll be talking about when we come back is some of the, sort of what maybe an alternative model might look like. If you've never sort of thought about sort of some other way to have a social model, we probably need to just talk about that, sort of explore that sort of idea. I think that's important. And we'll go back to Robert to talk about critical mass and also some of the scenarios that, of how change could occur. I think that's important to discuss as well. So look, we'll be back with these wonderful humans in a moment.
Access Manawatu is a non-profit radio station.
We exist to help people from Manawatu make programs just like this one.
All of our shows are free to listen to and free to make.
If you like what you hear and you'd like to help us make more,
you can donate through our website.
Go to www.accessmanawatu.co.nz and click on the donate link on the front page to help us keep on giving people their fair share of the air.
There is no question that within a relatively short time, we have the technical capacity to wipe poverty off the face of the earth. It isn't a question of the old socialist programs of robbing the rich and paying the poor. All that kind of thinking is entirely obsolete. It is a question of realizing that we are now in 1968, long beyond the age of scarcity, in which we cannot provide adequate and more than adequate necessities and luxuries for every human being on this planet. It is technically possible. The amount we have spent upon warfare collectively since 1914 could have given every human being on earth a comfortable independent income. And the amount we are spending daily on the war in Vietnam could abolish the problems of almost all underdeveloped nations in the world. But the confusion is, when we suggest the very idea that money doesn't matter, people feel deeply insecure. And if we should go further than that and suggest such outrageous ideas as that in the year 2000 AD there will no longer be taxation, that all utilities will be free, people say, where's the money going to come from? As if money was something that came from somewhere, in the same way as iron or hydroelectric power or lumber or just plain energy. Money doesn't come from anywhere and never did. Money is an invention in the same way that inches and hours and clocks and rulers are inventions.
Welcome back to Project Sanity. My name's Scott Andrew. I'm here with some wonderful humans. Back here with Jenny, a Venus Project volunteer from the USA. We've got Gabor from Envienta in Spain. We've got Charlotte from the RBE Learning Network from the Netherlands. And also from Netherlands, we have Robert from United Earth. Thanks so much for joining us. Really enjoying this conversation. Hey, so guys, I think let's get into, we just talked about before the break, actually, this idea of, Jenny went through some really, the 12 sort of, what did you call them, Jenny? Those 12 aspects you went through? What did you call them?
I just called them the 12 sectors of people that we're going to invite to the World Summit
great.
event.
And that was, it's fantastic because it kind of covers almost everything, doesn't it? It's very broad, and it's like, I think everyone can kind of attach themselves to something there, that they're, as you say, finding in their respective purpose. So let's talk about these, there's lots of, look, guys, as we know, there's lots of different views out there from different groups and different proposals about alternative economic models or social models, because we know the current one's not working, as we talked about before, unsustainable. And you can't sustain the unsustainable forever, right? So if we're going to have an alternative, I think it's important to explore that in the context of unification, because that's kind of what we're talking about, isn't it? If we're going to have an alternative economic model, let's go to Gabor. I think Gabor, in your view, what could an alternative economic model look like, and what are some of, I know you guys have been talking about with the World Summit some really interesting, which we talked about last time actually on the last episode, Unifying the Unifiers with the founders, was these alternative funding ideas being proposed and during the social transformation. So would you mind picking up that train of thought for us there, Gabor?
I'm more likely to talk about not just economic models and social. It's called socioeconomic models put together. So, and we can talk about more than one model, because I think thousands of different solutions around the world, and there are different names for it. But the foundations of these alternative models, socioeconomic models, are already here for years. Consider, for example, the sharing economy that we already know. We are using different types of apps of sharing of our tools or cars or apartments. But that's a good start of it, but it should move forward from here to share our time, our knowledge, our experience. You see the trends in the so-called gig economy, even if it's not working perfectly. but ultimately we are heading to the resource-based economy through this transition where we can share ultimately the means and resources. And there are a lot of other names of a new economic system or model, depends on different approaches. Regarding to economist Jeremy Rifkin, for example, we could use the term collaborative commons, which is all about communities working together in a new socioeconomic system. In the World Summit, for example, we are talking about the gift economy that gives the opportunity to share we already have by goodwill. And if you're talking about alternative funding ideas in the social transformation, we go through the line and we see different solutions. If you go to venture capitals, maybe it's based on interest or let's say ego. If you turn to government or government-based solutions, maybe it's not so effective these days. So we all know the crowdfunding model is a good practice. There are donation, reward, equity-based crowdfunding models. The latest one is the ICO model, which means initial coin offerings, when you create your own money or token for different purposes. And I think we are in the transition phase when we're tokenizing the value exchange process in all levels. It means we can build local or global economies, let's say global economies, based on the blockchain. Your token in this case has more than one use case. It can be used as a tool of exchange and equity or as a right to vote. And this way you can create decentralized autonomous organizations called DAO that can share the resources between the stakeholders. And that can be the basis of a new, more sustainable socioeconomic model. And I think through tokenizing the processes, we move forward to the resource-based economy. To make it clear, we cannot skip steps through the process on the road because of the current level of understanding and consciousness. So we have to go along with the majority and no one leave behind. And as we have the basic understanding of what is happening and what we can do in a non-violent way, we realize the only way to create new models that makes the old models obsolete.
That's fantastic. I mean, this is how I approach a lot of this sort of talking about these ideas. I think that last thing you just mentioned is fantastic. You know, this idea, I think Buckminster Fuller was one that talked about that, you know, this idea that if we build a new model or models, you know, then we don't need the current unsustainable one, right? That's the whole point. But unless would you guys agree, unless we actually build it, which is what we're doing here, that's what the World Summit is trying to do, right? We're trying to build the new system to make the other one obsolete. Because, like someone said before, we're not talking, I think it was Jenny, we're not talking about it, we're actually building it. I mean, this is part of it, part of the journey now, isn't it? Actually having the conversations and coming up with the strategies and actually building the new model to obsolete the current one. That's fantastic. Now, Robert, let's go back to what you were talking about before, actually. I think this concept of critical mass is a really important concept, and I think there's different views on sort of what that is. You know, if we talk critical mass, it's about critical mass of what? You know, of what are we talking about here, Robert?
Critical mass, it's a sort of concept. There is an institute, the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. They have found out that when just 10% of the population holds an unshakable belief, then the belief will always be adopted by the majority of society. So some believe that with the evolution of social networks as a vehicle to spread ideas, critical mass could be achieved with even a smaller percentage, maybe as low as 5%. So a decade ago, in 2006, 12 years ago, the environmentalist Paul Hawken, as you know, wrote a book about the blessed unrest. Paul saw in people all around the world who cared more for the planet and other people, that they joined social and environmental groups and causes. And they purchased green products and gave unselfishly to charities all around the world. And Hawken described this emergence, and I will quote him if you let me.
Absolutely.
From billion-dollar non-profits to single-person dot causes, these groups collectively comprise the largest movement on Earth. A movement that has no name, leader, or location, and that has gone largely ignored by politicians and the media. Now, Håkon described the organic nature of it, and he said, like nature itself, it is organizing from the bottom up in every city, town, and culture, and is emerging to be an extraordinary and creative expression of people's needs worldwide. So, one of the biggest problems in our world today is that we are so divided. And this division is what prevents us from coming together fully to create this more beautiful world in our hearts tell us is possible, right? So, as we begin to connect the dots and recognize the root causes, as well connect the dots of our activism, we are simultaneously beginning our transition to the new paradigm that wants to be born. So, when we, like cells in our bodies, connect and unify around this one focus, this one root cause, and find our oneness as a global species, one tribe, we will discover our power. And then, only then, we become the largest movement in history. Well, this is what just kicked off in Mexico. So, at the mini-summit, we acknowledged and received into our collective consciousness the notion that we have already achieved critical mass. And maybe we've reached it already a decade ago. And how do we come to this awareness, this consciousness? Well, we can take a look at some numbers, if you like.
Yeah, go for it. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, well, Paul Håkon said in 2006 there are about 250,000 social and environmental groups active. So that's already a lot of people. And in 2017, early last year, I think Mark Zuckerberg came out with his manifesto, an open letter, and well, he estimated that, or he's got real hard figures on it, that about 100 million people are on Facebook, are members of very meaningful groups. So with 1 billion people more active members from these groups. So they're all working towards creating a better world. So here's the strength. The diversity in all these different projects is beautiful. The thing is, it's all there, this potential, this force, and we have to sort of connect the dots and release this energy. So there are a lot of more numbers. I think we don't have to go into them all, but since 2006 there has been an explosive growth in social media usage. So I think the estimation is that right now we have about 500,000 to 750,000 groups active and movements worldwide. So you can imagine that once you go to this 5% or 10% of the population on Earth, that we can easily reach these 350 million people. So that's the critical mass that we already have.
It's incredible. And I think, just in the words of Troy Wiley, actually, co-founder of World Summit, it's about a tribe of tribes, isn't it, that we're trying to create here, I really like when he was talking about that on the show last time, this idea, this tribal quality about what we're trying to do here. And I think, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, I'm just going to mention this because Troy Wiley wrote a great book called The Next Copernican Revolution, which kind of changed my view on some of these ideas in this tribal context. And that's kind of where we are, guys, isn't it? When we really, if we just think back what we've just been talking about, some of these trends that Gabor was talking about in respect of, and Charlotte as well, the automation, the technology, the gig economy, and all these sort of trends and, the environmental decline and everything we're talking about, really, the collaborative commons that Jeremy Rifkin talks about, everything that's kind of emerging here now is really a massive worldview shift for the planet, isn't it? In that context of, Copernicus, realizing that we had a heliocentric model rather than a geocentric model. Would you guys kind of agree with that? I mean, what's your view on, would you mind just commenting on that, Charlotte? Just for context, I think, I just think the importance of discussing the gravity, what I would call the gravity of these trends that are in play. You know, you've talked about the gravity of how they're coming up regardless. All these trends are coming up in their social pressure, regardless of whether we're aware of them or not yet. You know, like some people, even some of the groups might not be fully aware of kind of how all this is kind of just coming towards us like a wave, if you like, you know. And so I think this what kind of Troy mentioned in his book, you know, this idea of it being kind of a Copernican revolution in respect of a worldview shift for the planet. What's your view on that?
Yeah, that's something I can definitely relate to. In fact, I did want to mention something about the concept of critical mass. To add to what Robert said, basically the term critical mass has been taken from the world of physics to apply to social phenomenon, and it means the sufficient number of adopters of a new way of doing things to make it the new standard. But I do see some things, some people misunderstand this concept. They think of it in terms of the 100-monkey effect. The 100-monkey effect is actually a nice story, but it's not scientific proof. I think we need to really look at these things scientifically. And there has been an experiment which has been done in controlled scientific situation with rats, which have shown that there is a relationship between something that a previous generation of rats has learned is passed on without any physical information being given to their children and grandchildren, that parents who learn how to get through a maze quicker, their children know how to do it immediately. So what this says is that we are able, when a large number of people is able to adopt the consciousness of unity, is able to adopt the consciousness of a new kind of way, the new paradigm that we're talking about, in which we're here to create a sustainable future, that as the more people that adopt that consciousness, the more easily that's going to spread throughout people. And that's really based on a scientific group of experiments with these rats. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's great. I just think it was important just to kind of mention that, you know, like we've talked to these, you guys have been talking about the trends, and Gabor talked about the trends as well. But I think, you know, to me, it's a gravitational force that's in play here when it comes to, you know, they're coming regardless of what your view on them is, and that's why I think it really comes back to, you know, this unification idea in respect of building the new model is a really important discussion to be having, even on the local level and, you know, on every level, really. And I think that's really important. So, look, I think let's get into, you know, Robert, let's go back to you, actually. I think if we talk change, you know, and I just want to say I have these conversations with people all the time in my, quote, normal life, if you like, and they go, you know, there's a lot of, there tends to be a bit of a no alternative narrative out there, you know, like apparently we're, you know, just, you know, I'm not putting one down, but I think there's a lot of people out there that think that the best of all possible worlds is a money price gain for the exchanges. And I think we're trying to get out of that idea that actually, if we wanted a better world, we could have one, right? We just need to make the collective decision to do it. So I think, Robert, would you mind talking about some of the possible scenarios for how change could actually occur? People say, oh, well, it's never going to happen. Well, you know, the trends are coming towards us. All of these socioeconomic trends are coming towards us like a freight train, another analogy. What are some of the possible scenarios? Because I know you guys would have talked about this at the mini summit, right? Some of the possible scenarios for how change could occur.
There are most likely 3 possible scenarios for change. So the first one is that the current socio-economical system will collapse, and then we'll have chaos. But if you ask me, or you ask my heart to speak, then I would say that we already are in a chaos situation. It looks like organized chaos, but still we're at the verge of it. So that's one scenario, and I don't think we can agree that we don't want chaos, right? Hopefully this will never happen. The second possible scenario would be that we can make some transitional stepping stones. So that means coming from the current socio-economical system we have now, that we can find some stepping stones to go to this new sharing and holistic system. You might want to think about things like this gift-based or basic income that you could implement as a stepping stone, and you can couple it to a 21-hour work week. There are studies from the New Economic Foundation from England that a 21-hour work week would be ideal for everyone to find this nice balance. Because we're going to lose a lot of jobs because of automation, right? So that would be an example for a transitional phase. And that's more something on the long term, I think, if we have the luxury for it. And then we have the third and scenario that also could happen, and that's the flip over model, to change overnight. And that means that we sort of, in a few weeks, when this chaotic collapse is sort of on the verge, then we might to come to our senses and decide to flip over overnight. And I think a lot of people think that it's sort of impossible to do, but I think it's most likely to happen, that it will go this way, if we can keep our calmness in the eye of the storm.
I think that's a really interesting idea. Can I just say, I think that's a really interesting idea because, you know, when the government makes a law and they say, right, well, it's going to, you know, whatever the law is, you know, these declarations and threats written on paper, the laws, you know, when they make a law and they say, well, we're going to implement it on this date, it's going to take effect. And that works. You know, like they notify the public and everyone kind of agrees that the government's made this decision. And then on that date, something becomes effective, doesn't it? You know, I mean, that's what happens. So it kind of could work like that, couldn't it? If the public kind of agreed that, well, actually, you know, this model's unsustainable. We all kind of agree. And so, okay, we know what we're going to do. And on this date, this is when it's going to happen. I mean, it sounds viable to me, logically.
Yeah, I agree, totally. And, well, we're not here, and also the World Summit is not here to promote any new solutions or anything. But yeah, you could do something like a zero billing law. I don't know if you heard about it, but if everyone would today go to, if you buy something, you go to a cashier and you enter zero in the administrative system, then basically you have a big, large administrative and logistic system, you know, sort of bookkeeping system. If we all keep on doing what we were doing today and tomorrow, then nothing will change. The only thing that will change is that there is a zero instead of another amount. And it seems very far-stretched, right, if you think about it, because it's a big jump for our mindsets to think this could work. But I think what you just said is true. I think we already have proof that we can switch overnight. And that's related to the 7 days of the week. I mean, there are 6 days in the week that we sort of all are running around doing, trying to survive, have our jobs, etc., etc. And then 1 day in the week, on a Sunday, then we decide to do things differently. If you step out the door on a Sunday, then you experience something, right? Maybe, Scott, you want to tell me what you experienced on a Sunday?
On a Sunday? What do I experience? Oh, you mean a day off work?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, you go to the park, you go for a walk, you spend time with your family, you do kind of what... I think we've become human doings, really, and not human beings, unfortunately. It's part of what our current model's done to us, really, is, you know, a lot of people are just doing stuff. Rather than being, you know, like just being humans or human beings, which is kind of, I thought, what we were supposed to be, you know, rather than do.
Exactly. But why? Why do you experience this?
Well, because we
agreed on it.
That's right. No, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this idea of making a collective decision to do something different is a really powerful idea to me. I think that idea, you know, if people haven't thought of it before, is to get together as a group, as a collective, to unify, tribe of tribes, however you want to interpret it, really, because there's so many different angles on this, and to actually make a collective decision to do something different. Now, what we're going to do, guys, we're just going to have a quick break, and I think what we'll do, we'll come back. I think we need to get into, some of the challenges, I think, that this sort of approach, what the World Summit's trying to do. It's pretty tall order in some people's mind, as, unifying the unifiers, and it's quite I think it comes with its series of challenges. We probably need to talk about that. And also, there's a lot of fears out there as well, I think, about, this sort of becoming some sort of like technocratic dictatorship or something, and I think we need to sort of maybe talk about that as well. So we'll be back in a moment.
The pain of watching the way the world is moving and the directions of war and human suffering and the loss of lives and the destroying of cities, all of that motivates me to try to do a better job than what politicians are trying to accomplish without knowledge.
The real revolution is the revolution of values. Human society appears centuries behind in the way it operates, and hence what it values. If we wish to progress and solve the mounting problems at hand, and in effect reverse what is an accelerating decline of our civilization in many ways, we need to change the way we think about ourselves and hence the world we inhabit. The Zeitgeist Movement's central task is to work to bring this value shift to light, unifying the human family with the basic perspective that we all share this small planet and we are all bound by the same natural order laws as realized by the method of science. This common ground understanding extends much farther than many have understood in the past. The symbiosis of the human species and the synergistic relationship of our place in the physical world confirms that we are not separate entities in any respect, and that the new societal awakening must show a working social model that is arrived at from this inherent logic if we expect to survive and prosper in the long term. We can align or we can suffer. It is up to us.
We're working in the wrong direction, and all over the world societies are collapsing, going bankrupt, not able to work things out because they use political methods, which was good, I said, 100 years ago, but they do not work today. So they're failing all over the world. People have to lose their homes, their jobs, then they have to lose confidence in the people they elected. Once that happens, they are open to new ideas. Oh, you'll never see that, not in 1,000 years. You're a dreamer. You're a utopian. You're a goddamn communist. Or you're this or that. I believe all things change. Utopia is an impossible concept. It assumes that you can design a city that's good for all time. You can't do that. Everything changes. I do not believe there are any final frontiers. I believe that men and women will continue to invent newer and better systems, and there's no limit to what humans can do. If enough people work at what I talk about, I believe we can change the world. If they do nothing, nothing will happen. I can't accept the world as it is today, so I do everything I can to build a world of sustainability for all people, not any single nation. I don't hope to gain anything. I just hope to do the best I can, and whatever happens, happens.
They will walk behind the plowshare, they will put away the sword. home. He's like the sun I might have known if God granted me a son, the son of sky, one by one, how soon they lie on and gone, and I am old and will be gone. Bring him peace. Bring him peace. Bring him joy. He is young. He is only a boy. You can take, you can give. Let him be. Let him live. If I die, let me die. Let him live. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him
Access Manawatu is a non-profit radio station.
We exist to help people from Manawatu make programs just like this one.
All of our shows are free to listen to and free to make.
If you like what you hear and you'd like to help us make more,
You can donate through our website.
go to www.accessmanawatu.co.nz and click on the donate link on the front page to help us keep on giving people their fair share of the air.
But the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing. The enemy is undefined. The common life capital it attacks is unknown. Both the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing who the enemy is and what the solution is. The life value turn, then, is the next stage of civilization. Reality hides in the language of the past. So capitalism is blamed by critics when real capital is in fact destroyed at every step. Journals report global wealth has soared 68% in 10 years, but life wealth is devoured as fast as the money sequence system can grow. Always the underlying life ground is lost beneath the competitive self-multiplication of the money demand invading all that exists. With no life value anchor and compass, the degenerate trends only deepen beneath reference body to recognize what they are. And I've spent most of my life as a professional philosopher on the problem of life value and social value systems. Although the sane may agree life value is what ultimately matters, nothing has been less understood. People called pro-life usurp the woman's body in the name of fundamentalist religions. Nations absurdly assume that standard of living is measured by the private money spent. Animal rights theory has no criterion to tell the life value of a snail from a person. Life sciences, all in quotes, sacrifice billions of animal lives a year for private money value gain, just about all of it. New and better technology has no life value standard to decide better from worse. Life value is the missing base. We really must get that one clear. But there are as many proxies for life value as there are values. Specialist domains like physiotherapy and medicine recognize life value in organic functions, but without principled meaning to apply to wider life systems. In general, life value ignorance defines our age. This is how the greatest of all fatal confusions has mutated, that money sequence growth equals life value growth. That's at the core of the whole cancer system. Just as the multiplying grotesque cancer cells eating the life host alive are not recognized on the micro level, so too on the social level of life organization. The proliferation, in fact, the exponential proliferation of banknotes, of bets, credit, and debt without legal tender drive financialization across the planet more daily than all the GDPs of the countries of the world put together over a year. They must loot life and life bases to keep growing without inflation, as trillions of new dollars are printed without life function. How are you going to have more and more money chasing fewer and fewer life goods? Well, just take it away from everybody else. So endless slashing of life goods and wages, benefits, social security, pensions, and environmental protections result as money demand powers multiply at the top. This is why endless bonuses for financial failure, stripping of the middle classes and the poor, squandering of public wealth on rich corporations, the list can go on, are demanded as U.S.-led wars for resources, new lands, and corporate markets never stop, and taxes on the rich are reversed. All predictable from the meta program. All is predictable once the cancer system is diagnosed. An ultimate question thus arises. What is the ground of response to this ruling value mechanism which cumulatively plunders human and other life to feed itself? We know the ultimate ground is life value, but what is life value? The objective standard and measure can be defined in 3 steps. All value whatever is life value. 2, good versus bad equals the extent to which life is more coherently enabled versus disabled. So it's basically enabling life, coherently enabling life value, or disabling it. It's good and bad, and it admits of degrees. By greater, lesser ranges or capacities of thought, felt being, and action through time. Those are the 3 fields of life that include all that is of value in life. And it all can be, the thing is, with the life value theory or understanding, you have no problem of difference of opinions because it's objective. It has objective measures too that nobody can coherently disagree with. The thing is, we haven't got down there for all the reasons I've been stating. Well, of course, we've had visions of world peace, the classless flourishing of people's lives, more equality, a planetary ecology in which humanity is its conscious understanding. All these ideals express this underlying life code of value. But who decides, skeptics ask? No one decides, because gains and losses in life capacity, that's the key, life capacity, are as objective as the laws of biology and medicine. Anything is better or worse by the greater or lesser range of life capacities it enables. It's almost worth remembering. Anything is better or worse by the greater or lesser range of life capacities it enables. Applies everywhere. This value code is built into evolution itself. I'm not inventing anything. I'm decoding. It is no matter a matter of opinion than people's life necessities are. And what is a need? What is a necessity? It's that without which life capacities are always reduced. It's objective. The ruling value mechanism is the polar opposite. It attacks life and life conditions everywhere as vehicles to its self-multiplying growth. Because this growth is assumed to be life value, however, the greatest value reversal in history goes unnoticed. The 3-step life code of value provides the generic life value compass and base which has been missing. It is objective because it is true, independent of anyone's perception of it. It has unlimited validity because there is no exception to it, which is testable by searching for one. It is presupposed in value judgments, as you can observe whenever these judgments are defended. They always end up, if they're saying it somehow protects or enables life. Life value is also universalizable because all values derive their worth from it. Finally, life value is sovereign because it trumps any other value in cases of conflict. All of these are testable generalizations.
Welcome back to Project Sanity. I'm here in the Palmerston North, New Zealand studio with remotely on an old piece of technology, Skype, with Jenny, Venus Project volunteer from the USA. We've got Gabor from Envienta. Envienta, isn't it, Gabor? Sorry, from Spain. Sure. Better get that right. Envienta. Sorry, better get that right. From Spain, we have Charlotte from the RBE Learning Network in the Netherlands.
It's actually called Moving Forward RBE Learning Network.
Oh, fantastic.
We've got a YouTube channel, so I want to get it right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's my fault, sorry. Moving Forward RBE Learning Network, no problem. And Robert from United Earth, also in the Netherlands. So look, great. It's really great, guys. Again, I just want to thank you for anyone that's just joining us. Thank you so much for joining, coming together and having this conversation. I think it's a really important conversation to be having after the mini summit that was held in January in Mexico, in respect of, again, what the World Summit's about is bypassing existing systems and borders to unify ourselves. Why wait for the government abstraction? Why wait for that? As we've talked about, critical mass has basically already been achieved. When you look at the number of non-government organisations that are basically, what was some of that stats? 250,000 social and environmental groups. Did I hear someone talk about before? It's powerful, isn't it? When you really think about that and think about the sheer critical mass that's kind of dissatisfied with this, as Charlotte talked about, the social dis-ease that is in play here and all these trends coming towards us. I think this idea of trying to unify in respect of an event, having to get together to have an event to discuss these multiple level solutions, because it is a multiple level thing. Everyone's got their different angles. Jenny before went through these different sectors in respect of she put forward 12 sort of angles that you can kind of take on this in respect of what does your group kind of belong to in respect of your purpose at the moment, and how can we broaden our purpose to take into account the larger order issue that's at work here in respect of the need to replace our current socioeconomic model with something that's sustainable. Or what Daniel Schmachtenberger talks about is a non-self-terminating system. And I think that's a really important concept for people to think about, is that our current model is fundamentally self-terminating. And we need to really start thinking about, any group out there and any individual, think about what a non-self-terminating system could look like and how we can move forward. As you say, Charlotte, moving forward, RBE learning. I think learning is a great concept, isn't it? Charlotte, let's go to you. I think, there's challenges here and there's fears, and I think everyone, we've been so deeply conditioned into the current socioeconomic model as we grow. Everyone has, that's where we're all kind of victims of our culture, as Jacques Fresco would say, in respect of our social conditioning and, things we do and assumptions we hold and the way we look at people and treat people, and I think it's really interesting when you think about the challenges facing all of us to unify. So would you mind talking about some of the challenges in the context of this mini summit? Because, you would have talked a lot about a lot there, and carrying on this train of thought that Jenny talked about before is, how are we going to bring this main event around? How are we going to manifest it? Because that's what we're doing. We're manifesting it into existence, really.
Well, I've done a bit of analysis about the general trends in the groups all working towards social change, and I think they fall pretty much into three areas. But before I talk about those, I want to tell you a personal story about how I got to the place where I am and where I am in the World Summit. I need to tell you to begin with that I've been an astrologer since I was 15. But when I got to university, I became a Marxist. I became convinced that the only way to get a world that everybody was able to have enough of what they needed was to follow Marxism and give everybody the same sort of things. When I left university, I went to the People's Republic of China to teach for the first time, and I saw that this country, which had been established on the principles of Marx, was not operating from a consciousness of sharing. It was still operating on a consciousness of directing and imposing ideals upon people. So I went to Tibet on my way back home, and I realized that you cannot impose change on people from outside. It has to be a change on the inside and at the same time on the outside. So this relates to the three trends that I see among groups working towards social change. You have, on the one hand, you have groups such as communist groups, socialist groups, some anarchist, socio-anarchist groups. And these groups you would probably also say are anti-religious or anti-spiritual, and they tend to advocate something more militant like a revolution. Then the second trend that you see among social change groups are holistic, environmental, human rights, and native wisdom or native rights. And these groups are generally anti-communist, and they're sometimes a little bit doubtful about the need to replace democracy, or what is called democracy is just basically a way of masking capitalism. And the third group that I think has emerged is the resource-based economy-oriented groups, which includes groups such as the Venus Project, the Zeitgeist Movement, the Money Free Party, Ubuntu, and Copiosis. And these groups all have the same goal, but are pretty much working isolated from each other. And all three of these groups still have the same aims, and I'm going to state these specifically. We talk about RBE, but for people who aren't familiar with this, I want to say that this stands generally for the equality of all people, secure basic conditions for life for everybody, freedom of expression, a sustainable environment, a moneyless economy, a lack of private property, and everything you need to develop yourself to your highest potential. So the big difficulty is that when you talk about this type of change, a lot of people think it's some kind of utopia. And what the World Summit is going to offer, it's going to offer the platform for all people coming from these different three groups to sit down at the same table. We're not waiting for permission from somebody to come to their table. We're going to create a new table that everybody working for change can come and sit down, and we exchange in a nonviolent way the best ideas that everybody has to plan the flip over that Robert talked about. And nobody comes there with the idea, we have the solution. We have to work in a sociocracy that everybody contributes the best of what they have, and everybody reaches by consensus the plan, the definite plan. So it's not utopia. We have a plan, we're going to make a plan, and with that plan, we can flip over. That's how we're going to meet this big challenge.
That sounds fantastic, Charlotte. I think that's great. And I think just, listening to you talk about that, I think that's a great way to frame it, actually, these kind of three, not to put people in boxes, but sometimes it's good to just kind of frame something like that in respect of where the groups kind of fit, and as you say, there are a lot of these groups now, emerging groups in respect of an RBE focus, but we have to remember that because of social conditioning and all of the social conditioning through history and all these little constructs that have been created through history in respect of Marx Marxism and communism and capitalism. And I mean, in my view, a lot of them now, they tend to, unfortunately, these constructs, these life-blind constructs that we've come up with in history that, writers have written down and they've kind of stuck. They tend now, unfortunately, to just, if you don't take a non-violent approach to communication, they tend to just sort of exist as limits of debate, and their kind of assumptions, their double-locked assumptions that are built into the constructs. And I think, kind of, in my view, that one of the challenges would be, not breaking through that. We won't talk about that, but, just bridging through, trying to bridge through across these different constructs and social conditioning to try to ease the pressure and find that common ground that we talked about today at the beginning, isn't it? That common ground that everyone has. We all have a unified interest here in a different kind of society. Robert, would you mind just picking up on that train of thought for us?
I feel that there are not that many huge challenges to overcome. So, except maybe some practical and logistics stuff on an operational level. I mean, I don't want to sound naive or anything, but we know a lot of movements and groups and people at the critical mass, right? We already understand the problems, like Charlotte just explained, and we see the solutions. And all these hundreds of millions of people are intrinsically motivated to make this world a better place. And all we have to do is we only have to free up this energy, connect it through a structure, and release it. So once that spark ignites this transitional wave, it will give so much positive vibes and attraction that the rest will almost follow automatically. And I see the main challenge that's facing us all is sort of about being able to hold the space and have trust in finding the balance and having the calmness when we reach this eye of the storm to hold the core group and the cores on vision to unite. This means having the trust to be able to and to be willing to let go of our beliefs and open up from a competition mindset to a co-creation mindset. One of the challenges I also see is that will be to translate and communicate this in an efficient way to all kinds of diverse groups that are operating all at different levels. So to come to this universal language will be a challenge. However, we are all connected through our hearts.
Completely agree with you, Robert. I think going back to something that Jenny said before is just, putting our egos aside and bridging the differences, but through a common ground. I think it's fantastic. And you're right, the critical mass, I think you're right. If we really take that into account, that, the dissatisfaction that people have with the current model, all the groups that have been formed, I guess the real ultimate question on a lot of people's, in a lot of people's minds, with, when I talk to as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you guys probably have these sort of conversations with people as well, is what, I think probably what we'll do, we'll just go around, I think, everyone and give everyone a chance to answer this question, because I think that it's a really important sort of thing to discuss and get kind of everyone's view on it. Is what is it that we can do here in respect of the World Summit and anyone really, all the groups and anyone involved in trying to manifest this event to come together to unify? What are some of the guarantee? What's the guarantee? I mean, is there a guarantee really that this, these fears, that it won't become some kind of technocratic socialist dictatorship? I think, as we know, there's a power drive that is in control at the moment in the current social order. And I think let's start with Jenny. What's your view on this, Jenny?
Well, I actually think it's pretty simple and self-explanatory when we put out the idea of leaving the ego out the door. So anyone with a big ego can probably self-eliminate. I don't think they'd be actually interested. And the idea of a gift-based economy, I think, will eliminate a lot of naysayers or people that don't believe in the idea that it's even possible. So our goal is to put out our mission, our purpose, and we believe with the heart and spirit and consciousness, the right people will just show up. And it will be almost effortless if we put out a right purpose. It will call the right people. and transpire with the correct frequencies and attract those. And others that are in it for themselves or for money or for ego probably won't be interested in what we're doing. I think that will be the first step of self-elimination. And then on top of that, we will be putting out educational videos on how to have nonviolent communication, how to not have egos and put that away and be purpose-driven mindsets. And so a lot of it will be done through education. And I think with that in mind, and being such a collective environment, a collaborative event, that there is no room for authoritarian. I think that is due to the fact that the socioeconomic system is based on, leaders. Our new model is leaderless. So I don't think we'll have that issue, actually.
Great. I think, Tony Kriegel, when he was on the show, talked about passing buckets. You talked before about, the house is on fire, and what we need to do is start passing buckets. And I think it's a great way to put it, actually, when he did do that. I never really thought about that. And I think this idea that, he said that when you're passing buckets in that situation, the house is on fire or the planet's on fire, if you like, that the person next to you don't have any differences with that person because you've got a goal. Like the goal is to just put that fire out, and you have to work together, really, because what else are we supposed to do? Just let it burn? So I think it's a really interesting way to put it. Hey, that's great. Thank you so much for that, Jenny. That's fantastic. Gabor, let's go to you. We haven't talked to you for a while. You're still there, eh? Hey, what's your view on this, on these concerns, the fears and concerns out there? And when I said technocratic socialist dictatorship, I mean, we're being hyperbole there. There's lots of different fears and on many different levels, isn't there, of fears that, this isn't just going to work, so let's not even try. What's your view on that?
I would approach this as you call socialistic technocratic dictatorship from a different point of view, because fear mostly comes, I think, from the lack of knowledge. And that's because nowadays we have the construct called private intellectual property. So I think we have to spread knowledge in an open way in the long term or in the midterm. And there's a shift here, as you see, going everything on open source. So we see, for example, exponential technologies like robotics and AI, 3D printing, and sensors, etc. As we see, believe it or not, we're living in a technology-based social construct or something like that. So we have to make these things open source to provide access for everyone. And I think from this point, it starts with open soul and open heart, with open mind and open knowledge. I mean, open source knowledge. And that brings us to an open society. And later, that brings us new open organizational models instead of corporations and closed models. Yeah, that's my opinion about it.
I think that's great. I think this idea of an open source society is a very interesting concept for people to think about, because that's kind of, again, if we just think back to the trends you talked about before, Gabor, just all of this sort of technology and stuff is coming towards us, isn't it? It's just coming towards us, and if we don't sort of start to harness it in the most, I hate to use the word efficient because it's got so many different incorrect applications, but I think it's really about that, isn't it? It's about what as a society do we need to do to harness the trends that are in play in respect of what's going to meet the needs of people, in respect of, a need is that without which life capacity is always reduced. It's only what a need is, and it's not that criterion's not even in the current model, and that's why it's all being cumulatively destroyed. Look, let's go to Charlotte. What's your view on these fears, or this idea that it's just going to turn into a technocratic dictatorship, so no thank you.
Yeah, that's. I think what Gabor said is just fantastic. I think also one thing people in my work as an English teacher, of course, I teach a lot of dystopian novels, And in most of these dystopian novels, you see some kind of horrible future coming because of the influence of technology. But the problem is people don't realize that technology is being used for money, and the profit incentive takes away the correct application of technology. So again, we get back to what Gabor says about this open source and open access, which is already taking place. I mean, this is going to make such a big change, but also when technology is directed towards the good of the people and the good of the planet, that no one person profit from it, that's going to make it only helpful, and we're not going to be using it unless it's helpful. The bottom line is something good for people, for life, and for the planet, or not? Another thing I wanted to mention, how we can avoid or guarantee that what the World Summit proposes is not going to be turning into some kind of dictatorship, is that inside the group at the mini summit, beginning there and continuing in our work afterwards, we use the principle of being the change we want to see. So everything we do is done in terms of consensus. If there is any kind of disagreement or difficulties coming up, we work together from a non-ego perspective, from the perspective that we are all learning and that everybody is a teacher. Nobody knows everything. We are working on a vision council, which is a group that is focusing on keeping to the vision and that we don't get sidetracked on what the original purpose is. We're working on the wisdom council. So this is a group that is an objective sort of mediator when there are some kind of things that need to be worked out. And again, the whole principle of sociocracy, so that there's a kind of rotation of responsibilities and functions, that no one person is in control of anything, but that we are all working together, all responsible and all authorized to make this change.
I think that's fantastic. You know, something you just said, Charlotte, which really stuck out for me, I think I just want to comment on, is how you said we're all teachers. You know, I think that's really important, is that we've all got something to give, haven't we, in the context of giving, you know. And also we're all students as well, because we all have something to learn. And I think, you know, in the current sort of, it depends where you're from, you know, we're talking to the whole planet here, but it depends where you're from. But, you know, in the current model, it's like there's a teacher and a student, and there historically has been, in the industrial schooling model, there's historically been this idea that, well, the teacher's got the knowledge and the student's only there to learn, and that maybe that, you know, sometimes some of the young students might think, well, the teacher can't learn anything from me because I don't know anything. But actually, you know, like, it's not that at all. You know, you learn heaps from everyone, don't you? It doesn't matter where, and if we take us out of that industrial idea of like what the current model was set up, you know, for, again, no one's fault, let's just talk about what it is. If we just think of what a new model is, and if we take that approach, I just love what you're talking about, what all of you are talking about, removing the ego, guiding, you know, from the heart, being a student and a teacher all the time, giving, non-violence. I mean, this is all good stuff, right? This is fantastic.
Could I just add one thing also that I think is essential in terms of we are all teachers and we are all students? It is, in my opinion, it's really vital that we include people from areas of the world that at this point don't have very much to say about what's going on globally. So I'm talking about people in areas that are not European or not North American or not, let's say, English speaking, but really getting from South America, from Asia, from Africa, really getting that input. And one of the representatives in the mini summit is indeed from Africa. We had we had people representing all different races, but I really think this cannot be a white entitlement, entitled plan, that we really need to integrate people who are not in a position to make so much of an input right now, but we need their input to get this global balance working.
Oh, that's fantastic, Charlotte. And, I completely agree with you. And again, just to state for anyone that hasn't listened to this whole broadcast, the World Summit is not saying they have all the solutions. What the World Summit is saying is, let's unite and let's join together and let's present our solutions and discuss in a non-violent way, and let's be the change we want to see and create the new model that is going to obsolete our current self-terminating model. I mean, we've got to do something. I think it's really important that we all start to really think on this sort of level. You cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that created them. Hey, Charlotte, thank you so much. Look, what we'll do, we'll just finish up today with Robert. I think, Robert, just again on the same train of thought, and I guess to close with closing words today, from the end of this show, I think it's been a great discussion. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and it's just been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think we've got some really, really good stuff happening. I think it's really important that we really all start to think about this idea of unification and how we can bridge those differences. Robert, what would you like to offer as closing words today?
Well, I would really like to ask every group movement that is working towards a better world and all these beautiful projects. I want to ask them to sort of step up, step forward, or they're already doing it, but in maybe a different kind of angle, and open up to this incredible opportunity we have now, right? So we really want to see how we can support each other. So we want to support every group and all the delegates and people to become aware of our group capacity also. We want to coach each other, to learn to zoom in and zoom out, and to circle all around. Every topic we have to find a sort of consensus on. And I think this is a necessity to hold the space for the whole platform so that we can grow stronger in our foundation, and then we can also resist and absorb shock waves. We will experience a lot of internal turbulence for sure, and there will be a lot of external influences. It's like a ripple effect. But there is a certain maturity and wisdom that is in all these groups and movements, and we just have to find a way to manage this. Well, it's not the right word, but yeah, do this in an efficient way. And again, there will be challenges and disturbances, but that goes hand in hand with transition or transformation, right? I mean, in the caterpillar's cocoon, there's chaos, right? Before the butterfly is shaped to come out. So this is my closing. And oh yeah, we should stay away from the dogma trap. Be alert for it.
That's great. Look, thank you so much, guys. Really enjoyed today, and that's really awesome. So I really look forward to catching up with what the World Summit is up to, and we'll probably see if we can get some different groups on next time as well to get some more angles on this, because I think that's what it's about, different angles and different views on sort of what's happening and how we're going to manifest this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you're doing great work, so appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, really, thanks.
The 3-step life code of value provides the generic life value compass and base which has been missing. It is objective because it is true, independent of anyone's perception of it. It has unlimited validity because there is no exception to it, which is testable by searching for one. It is presupposed in value judgments, as you can observe whenever these judgments are defended. They always end up, if they're saying it somehow protects or enables life. Life value is also universalizable because all values derive their worth from it. Finally, life value is sovereign because it trumps any other value in cases of conflict. All of these are testable generalizations. But what of measure or more or less life value? Life value is measurable in degrees by greater or lesser capacities of thought or felt being and action shown through time. For example, how much life capacities gain or lose by nourishing versus junk foods. Today, the macro trends are in one-way loss of life capacities. Knowledge is the exception. It forms the way stations of life understanding passed on to others and subsequent generations across epochs, the distinguishing life capacity of the human species. But even knowledge is threatened by corporate rights against its dissemination at the same time as there is mass propagation of public lies. New electronic communication capacities without corporate control still win the war by the greatest civil community development in history, the Internet. But the life and death fields of invasion by the ruling money value mechanism are not decoded. Where, we might ask, did the transnational money sequences not destructively invade the evolved fields of life of humanity and fellow species? Exponentially multiplying money sequences eat away at the margins of every private transaction, public funding, life exchange and substance with and across borders. On the local level, hardly a shop, a buyer, a builder, a home dweller. This was pointed out to me, by the way, by a Zeitgeist member who's a professor of physics. He says, look at it. On the local level, try to look anywhere, any exchange, any step. A buyer, a builder, I'm putting it in a summative language, a home dweller. Anybody who lives today is not invaded by the same financial mechanism, with ever more rights to demand at every exchange site with no function, while enforcement is paid by the public, being stripped by it. How else would a cancer system behave? So if you think of it, this model, it's an explanatory model, not a metaphor. How else would it, if it's true, or if you just want to test it's true, how else, if you were going to have a cancer at a social level of life organization, how else could it behave than the way it's behaving? Always one way. Always the same. The world-deciding choice begins with what you buy. Clearly, for example, eating, selling, or supplying junk foods is objectively bad to the measure it disables human life and produces global epidemics of obesity, heart failure, cancer, and diabetes, which it does. Yet even economic science calls them all goods. It's written right into the textbooks. They're all goods. Newspapers call them all goods. This immense presupposition against fact goes without notice, whatever the rising disease effects. Simultaneously, violence entertainments flood public airwaves and play spaces as the same consumers, most avidly the young, they are seeing flooding images of humanity being killed, tortured, injured, humiliated. And as the sugar lard salt concoctions are ladled into bloodstreams and throwaways clog the Earth's circulatory channels at the same time, we begin to see the multiplying destructive occupation of the fields of life and life substance as built into these runaway growths and their goods. Life capacities at every level are attacked as market freedom. Only life value ground and measure can penetrate the disease none define, to addictively disable human life capacities for more transnational money sequences through ever more lives from infancy onward. Addictively disable. That's the secret to all these commodities, as far as they can take it. Where's their exception?
The type of sanity that we're interested in is really well-being of the individual, meaning that they are capable of making sense of the world and acting in ways that are healthy, adaptive, functional for them, and that are not unhealthy for the society as a whole unnecessarily.
Pain of watching the way the world is moving and the directions of war and human suffering and the loss of lives and the destroying of cities, all of that motivates me to try to do a better job than what politicians are trying to accomplish without knowledge. If enough people work at what I talk about, I believe we can change the world. If they do nothing, nothing will happen. I can't accept the world as it is today, so I do everything I can to build a world of sustainability for all people, not any single nation. I don't hope to gain anything. I just hope to do the best I can, and whatever happens, happens.